How many real estate investors do you know that attributed their success to the famous Rich Dad Poor Dad, the famous Purple Book? So I decided I'm going to reread the book and really see what the main themes are, because while there is a big theme of real estate investing in the book, there's so much more to it. And so that's why I created this video, so that we can go through what those key takeaways are that Robert Kiyosaki shares, and also how I'm going to implement his lessons into my own life. So let's dig into it. So there's 6 main lessons that Robert Kiyosaki talks about in Rich Dad Poor Dad. And the first one is that the rich don't work for money, the rich have money work for them in the form of cash flowing assets. So the book starts off with a bang, where Robert Kiyosaki comes in and disrupts everything that you know about income and shares that there's 3 main types of income: ordinary, portfolio, and passive. So the first one is ordinary income, and that's where you work for money. You work for a wage, you potentially get a salary, or you get paid hourly. And this is where most people get stuck into the rat race, which we will talk about later. But essentially the goal is, like, how do you get money to work for you? And that's where passive and portfolio incomes come into play. Now, portfolio income is generally paper assets like stocks and bonds, while passive income is considered more hard assets like real estate and businesses, for example. Now, I don't like the word passive because it implies that you don't have to do any work and that you just receive the income. And really, passive and portfolio incomes, like whether that's stocks or real estate or business, I'd say that they're pretty interchangeable. And so I think that can be really misleading. So instead, I'm gonna keep calling passive and portfolio income basically the same thing. Now, the goal is that we turn ordinary income into passive and portfolio income. So we work for a wage and we get paid, and we put some of that income into assets like real estate and stocks. That is the goal. And how you get there is by understanding how money works and the difference between assets and liabilities. So that's where the next lesson comes into play. So the next lesson is why teach financial literacy? It's not how much you make, it's how much money you keep. Now, this one I think is one of the most important, because it's not only about how much you make, but how much you keep. It's about living below your means. It's about putting money aside into savings, and it actually borrows some key concepts from our friend Dave Ramsey. Now, there's so many videos out there going Robert Kiyosaki versus Dave Ramsey, but really this is a key lesson that Dave Ramsey is always talking about living below your means and putting money aside for savings. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you're making $2,000 a month, $20,000 a month, or $200,000 a month. Because if you're not putting money aside, if you're living up to that income, then you're basically living paycheck to paycheck. You can make $200,000 a month and still live paycheck to paycheck. Most of the time, making more is not the solution, but it's about living below your means and really managing your money. So what the poor and middle class will do is they'll buy liabilities thinking that they're assets. And the easiest way to differentiate between a liability and an asset, based on Robert Kiyosaki, is an asset is something that will put money into your pocket, versus a liability is something that'll take money away from you, or something that you have to spend on. For example, a house, while it is real estate, if you live in it, it's a liability because you have to pay that mortgage. You have to pay for your utilities and maintenance, and you're paying into it. Versus a real estate investment, that's something where you buy it and it's giving you money, it's giving you cash flow. You rent it out to tenants, and now you're, hopefully if you buy the right one, you're making positive cash flow and it's putting money into your pocket every month. So that is a key that the rich do, is that they buy assets like real estate and stocks and let those assets do the heavy lifting of compounding and building wealth for them. Now let's get into the next lesson. So the next lesson from Robert Kiyosaki is that to mind your own business. And here again, we have an idea that both Dave Ramsey and Robert Kiyosaki share, and that is to live below your means and not keep up with the Jonases. There's so many videos out there comparing the two, but I feel like there's not enough videos sharing how they both have very similar values. And this is just one of them, about not comparing yourself to others, not comparing yourself to the neighbors, living below your means, and not trying to keep up with the Jonases. And definitely there are some differences between Robert Kiyosaki and Dave Ramsey, but I think in this one, if you want to be truly financially successful, you need to learn from both of them. And I love that this idea of minding your own business is common between both of them. And there's a lot that Robert Kiyosaki talks about further. And one aspect is that the rich focus on themselves and acquiring assets, versus the poor and middle class really try and get those liabilities in order to impress people that they don't really even like. Now, that doesn't mean that the rich don't have indulgences or they don't go out and splurge on that new Lamborghini, but I think the difference is like what their intention and how they go about it is. And for one, the rich, I think, are in a much better spot to afford cars like a Lamborghini. And also they ask, how can I afford it? Versus someone who's poor or middle class will think about, okay, I want a Lamborghini. That's gonna cost me X amount per month, which means, okay, I need to go to school to start in this career, and then I need to get promoted to this level. And at that level, I'm gonna make X amount of dollars per year, which means that I can finally afford a Lamborghini. That's how the poor and middle class look at expenses like this. Versus a rich or wealthy person will look at, okay, how can I make this purchase with my investment? So for example, instead of thinking, okay, I need to put aside $200,000 to buy a Lamborghini, they're gonna be like, okay, I'm gonna put $200,000 away into a real estate deal, into an investment property or stocks that are then gonna make me cash flow, and then that cash flow is gonna pay for that car, that liability. And then while that asset is paying for that car, it's also appreciating at the same time. So long term, they're just getting ahead. And also, while the rich are buying toys like Lamborghinis, they're also thinking about how can they use it for tax benefits. So for example, if they've got they're using a car to take clients out so that they can write that car off, or if they're using it for promotional material, then that way they can write that car off. So really using that car as an investment in their business while also being able to enjoy the finer things in life. And that's actually a great segue into the next lesson of history of taxes and the power of corporations. Taxes are one of the biggest expense, whether you're an individual who's poor or rich. If you're an individual or a corporation, taxes are going to be the biggest expense, and you want to find a way to minimize it as much as you can. Now, how taxes are applied is different. So for an individual, you get a salary and then you get taxed and then you get paid out what's left and then you spend after that. Versus a corporation will make income, then they'll spend what they need to on expenses, for example, like that Lamborghini, and then they'll have a profit that they'll show, and then they will pay taxes after all their expenses are already paid for, which is a really big difference of how much you pay. So for example, if you're only paying on like profit, then you're paying a much lower amount of tax, versus if you're paying like a salary where you get taxed at your full income and you're not able to write things off, then you're paying a lot more taxes as an individual. For example, a few years back, there was a story about Grant Cardone, who at the end of the year, he had a bunch of taxes to pay, and he's like, hey, I'm just gonna get a private jet instead. Or actually what happened was his accountant came to him and was like, hey, you're gonna have to pay this much in taxes unless you can find additional expenses that you have. And then he decided, hey, let's just buy a jet because it would be cheaper to buy a jet than to pay for the taxes that he had to pay that year. And so he ended up buying a jet, wrote it off, and then paid much lower taxes in that year. So again, another way that the rich use corporations to buy things that they want and luxuries. While the jet is obviously going to help him with his business, it's also a luxury and a perk of having money. But how can you apply the power of corporations into your own life? Now, as individuals who earn their income through a salary or get paid hourly, you don't really have many options to write off things. But what you can do is, let's say you have a side hustle. This is where you can really take advantage of preferential tax treatments. Let's say you set up an LLC for a side hustle that you have, like let's say dog walking. Now you'll earn income through dog walking. Let's say you make $1,000 a month. Now, because it's in an LLC and because it's a business and it's not earned income, it's not you earn 1,000 and you have to pay taxes on 1,000, but you're gonna get $1,000, and then you're able to write off things that you needed for that business, whether it's dog treats or poopy bags. And then let's say at the end of the year, you only end up with a net income of 500, then you pay taxes on that 500 instead of that 1,000. So that's an easy way that you can take advantage of corporations in your own life. And it's actually something that I've used to save thousands of dollars in taxes as well, whether it's through writing off podcasting or YouTube or other side hustles like property management. And that has really allowed me to pay much lower taxes. Now, the other way that you can take advantage of how corporations are able to pay a lower tax is when you get your paycheck, pay yourself first. So like, let's say you get paid $1,000 a week, take like 5 or 10%, so like $50, $100, and put it into a savings account, like a high yield savings account, or even into like a stock market with an ETF, and just use that as money that you pay yourself. That's where you pay yourself first, and then you pay everything else after, for whether it's rent, your bills, pay all of that after. Because when you pay yourself first by putting money aside, you're taking advantage, you're basically learning what corporations do, but applying it to your own life. And over time, the goal is that that amount that you put aside will grow. And let's say it's just in a regular savings account, eventually it'll grow large enough where you can make bigger investments, whether that's real estate or like big stock market purchases. That is things you can do when you pay yourself first by putting money aside before you pay anything else. And that leads to the next lesson by Robert Kiyosaki, which is that rich invent money. Now you must be thinking, how do the rich invent money? What the? Well, the way that they do that is by putting money into their investment. So for example, let's say you bought a piece of real estate, or you bought into the stock market. Over time, that value is going to go up. So when you sell it or you refinance like an investment property, that's basically money that you are inventing in a way. So let's say you bought a property for 100,000 and goes up to 200,000. You put a home equity line of credit on it for like, let's say 50,000. That 50,000 is essentially money that the bank has created for you. So that's what the rich do. They take advantage of things like that, whether it's through real estate or other stocks that they buy. They let it grow and then they leverage against it, which essentially creates money. So one way that you can do this as well is like, let's say you get restricted stock units as part of your compensation at work. What you can actually do is get a loan against it to invest into things like real estate or the stock market if there's other areas where you think you would make more money than the RSUs that you have. And that way you're not selling your RSUs and you still have them, and those are going to grow as well. But then you're also able to leverage that to make other investments and grow and multiply your wealth. Now, obviously, there are risks to that. Do it wisely, but in essence, that is what the rich do. So now let's go to the next lesson, which is work to learn. Don't work for money. Now, what exactly does that mean? So there's a few aspects of what it means to work to learn, not to earn. So the first part is when you're working to learn, there's like this sense of abundance that you're not in it for the paycheck, you're looking to learn. So definitely there is a level of like financial, not freedom, but financial security that you need to be at, where, hey, if you got paid less for something, that you'd still be okay. But it starts to like really develop that habit and muscle of abundance. And where Robert Kiyosaki really focuses in on this is the idea of giving money away. So Robert Kiyosaki, which is another key lesson that I really like about him. And again, this is actually very similar to Dave Ramsey with his philosophies of tithing. So basically the concept is that you give away a percentage of your income or wealth every year. And there's a few things to that. One is it creates a level of abundance because you're giving money away because you know that there's so much in the world and you're not hoarding money. And then also it exercises that muscle because you need to start giving away money now to charity and donating money. Because let's say your goal is to give away 5% or 10% and you're making $1,000 a month. So you could give away like $20, $30, $40. It seems like a lot because you're not making that much right now, but it's gonna build that muscle because when, let's say you get to that stage where you've got $1 billion, once you're there, it's gonna be harder to give away like 10%, which would be like 50 million, because you've never given money before. So it's something that you need to start immediately, start now. And that's something that I've been slowly implementing, is giving money away. Now, I don't generally give money away to charities, but more like initiatives. If someone's done like a GoFundMe page, or if there's what I'm trying to do a lot of is especially people on the street here in Seattle. There's a big homeless population. So if I try and carry around a few dollars change with me so that I can give, even if it's just $1 to someone. I think that really helps, and hopefully I get to the stage where I'm carrying bigger dollar bills and I'm giving even more money away. So that is the goal. So while we're talking about enough money going around and having this idea of abundance, there's 5 key lessons that Robert Kiyosaki also talks about why most people don't get ahead. And it really starts with fear. People have a lot of fear about losing money, and the fear of losing money for most people is greater than the joy of making money, which really limits people and prevents them from winning financially. financially. So at the end of the day, you need to play to win, not lose, offense versus defense, especially when it comes to your money and economic security. And then there's cynicism of you're always analyzing, you're always playing it safe and never taking any action and always thinking, okay, there'll be a better time later. But that cynicism prevents you from ever taking action, and if you don't take action, you're never gonna get ahead. And then there's laziness, which is really contradictory to what you might think. You might be thinking, okay, you gotta work hard, but actually the rich believe that working hard does not get you financial security. It's more about working smarter. So that's why things like real estate or business are so key, because you can leverage your time and efforts and money as well. So if you have a business that has like 10 employees, you have now 10 people that are working for you, versus if you're just working overtime, then there's only so many hours in a week that you can make money off of. And that is why you need to find ways to be more creative and really not be lazy, as Robert Kiyosaki says. The next one is bad habits. So what I did talk about earlier about paying yourself first, if you don't build that habit, then other habits are gonna get in the way of that. And so that's why it's more important than ever to always be paying yourself first and sticking to good habits. And then lastly, we've got arrogance, where people think that they need to know it all, but more important than knowing it all is knowing what you don't know so that you are aware of your blind spots and you can take action for it. And one last piece of advice from Dave Ramsey is, if you live like no one else now, then you can live and give like no one else later. So get out there and start living like the rich, and definitely check out one of these videos on financial freedom and personal finance next.